got 25 minutes. We got to go.
Hey everyone, happy Wednesday. Oh, it looks like Winston is having some technical difficulties. So you're just seeing me. Oh, there you go. There you are. Happy hump day, everyone. Welcome to Say That channel. If this is the first time that you're with us, go ahead and put a 1 in the comments. We love to shout out all of our newcomers. And if you have been here before, if this is not your first time, go ahead and put a 2 in the comments so we can shout you out. But welcome everybody. Welcome to Say That channel, where we are unapologetic about the ugly come up of entrepreneurship. So you know how you hear those stories about people who start from nothing and then all of a sudden have massive success? And you're like, but what happened in the middle? What happened during the ugly come up? Well, that is what we're here to talk about, ladies and gentlemen. What are the pitfalls we need to circumvent? What's the mindset we need to have? So that way we can help each other in all of our entrepreneurial journeys. So I'm really excited. Yes, please make sure you're checking in with us on Patreon. We have all of our overtime episodes because when we have guests, we love to ask them even more questions, get deeper into the topic, and you can find a lot of really great information over there on Patreon. And so today's topic, I'm really excited. Drum roll. Is knowing enough, or do results only come from walking the path? What a great question. So Winston and I are not the only ones who are going to be answering today's topic question. We have a great set of guests who are coming on with us today. I'm really excited for them to share with you because they get really into this topic a lot. This is what they're doing on essentially almost a daily basis. They're trying to help people not just know the path, but walk the path. And I'm really excited to bring to the stage David Maples and James Chavez.
Our next guest.
Hey, there they are.
Welcome in, guys.
Hey, everyone.
Hello.
Well, we're super excited to have you on with us. And so for those who are meeting you for the first time, would you guys mind sharing a little bit about your own entrepreneurial journeys and how you got on the path to where you are now?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of things. So I have a coaching business that I started in 2020. And then from that kind of offshoot came the Driving Awareness, which is a nonprofit that we're going to be speaking into today. So all of it kind of came out of my own desire after 22 years at the same company, and that desire to always kind of have my own business, do my own thing, and finally got the opportunity. And then once I was there, I was like, uh-oh, now what? And so that's where it's like starting into that conversation and going down that road. But yeah, so it's so we have 2 entities that we're working with.
Awesome.
Yeah. And for me, it's been, I would say, a journey from even when I was very little, from, starting a little lemonade stand or selling avocados outside of my house, and that little bit of entrepreneurship that just kind of had that spark for a lot of my life. So much so that when I was 17, I wanted to really get a jump start and I wanted to start a business. And so I was like, Mom, can I get emancipated? And she was like, are you insane? Like, because I was just so ready to I want to sign my documents and do everything on my own, and got crazy. And so the origins are very early on for me, but I would say about 5 years ago at the outset of the pandemic was when I really took that leap. I found a mentor. I quit my corporate job and found my mentor, but I quit 2 weeks before the pandemic started. So then everything was on lockdown, and it's been quite a ride. But yeah, from there to now, there's been a lot of ups and downs, but it's only been worth every moment of it.
Say that. I hear that.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so you two both have very interesting backgrounds, and yet you both came from corporate, so you have that kind of in common as you made the switch over. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on today's topic. Is knowing enough, or do results only come from walking the path?
Yeah, so I'll jump in here. So where this kind of spawned from was in my coaching, we talk about getting to the root cause of things, right? And so what I really love to talk about in this topic is it's the enlightenment versus the embodiment, right? Because everybody talks about, I want to be enlightened. Well, that's great, but that's the knowledge piece of it, right? And so and I always say, people always say knowledge is power. And I go, no, it's not, right? Because if it were, as soon as you picked up your phone, you'd be the most powerful person in the world, but that's not the case, right? It's the application of that power, or of that knowledge, that makes you powerful. And so what I like to speak into is the enlightenment is that knowledge, right? The application of that is the embodiment piece of it. So we may have the knowledge, but until we apply it and embody it, or another way I like to say, until we show up being as that person, that knowledge is still here. It's not really doing anything. And so the example I use with my clients is like, let's say you went to the doctor, and they went to the doctor and they said, look, if you change nothing, you have a maximum of 6 months to live. You'd be like, holy cow. But if they told you, listen, if you change 1 or 2 things right now, that'll up you to a minimum of 2 years plus, depending on what you do. Now, how many of us would change 1 or 2 things right now? I know I would, right? But now what's the difference? What stops us? We know that information, but we haven't applied it until we get this diagnosis saying, hey, something drastic is going to happen. Then all of a sudden that knowledge turns into embodiment, something that we are now being, right? And so I think that's what happens for me in my journey of my entrepreneurship. I was gaining all this knowledge and thinking, okay, I'm ready. I've got it. I know all this stuff. I got my coaching certifications. I was armed to the teeth with all this information and knowledge, but I wasn't embodied in it, meaning I didn't know how to show up as that. So then as I would go out into the world to be a coach and find clients and create my business and start writing and doing all these things, I was still coming from this perspective of knowing these things, but unsure of how to apply it, right? And so that was the piece that I was missing. And so now the work that I do now is through that breath work, is how do we get out of our heads or get the knowledge out of our heads, I should say, and be embodied in that. So now then when we show up, we're not just thinking about being a person that's engaging and that is empowered and that's fulfilled. We are being that person. And now the world shows up very differently for us. So that's kind of where I kind of come into. And then James, I'll let you kind of come in from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of it very much in the same framework, but in the sense of taking action is the biggest component, because I see a lot of folks, because I work directly with small startups, small businesses, and help them fundraise and all that kind of stuff. And I see this paralysis that happens. And I've been there myself at the early outset of my entrepreneurship journey of I almost had imposter syndrome, where a lot of folks kind of have this, where I need to know more and more and more and more, and not really trusting that gut feeling of I know enough, I now need to act. And that kind of paralysis by analysis of I'm going to think my way out of this, and I'm going to try to read as many books, and then once I have one more book under my belt, or one more coaching session or something of the like, then I'll be ready and I'll be enough to go out and go pursue customers and make those sales calls and everything like that, which is it's funny because most people already know way more than they think, and they can go and apply it right away. But it's that fear of that kind of unknown and abyss of I need to go step out in the world and actually take action on this. And sometimes it feels like boiling the ocean, where it's how do I take on this gargantuan task of building my business or creating relationships, and it can be overwhelming at times.
So for both of you, go ahead, Jay, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Do you think this, and you both mentioned this to some degree, is it just this sense of I may fail or I won't? Let's say if we use the example of a sale, and I'm studying and doing all these things, or I want to be a coach. Is it the idea that I'm not good enough to do this thing, or I just won't do this well enough to even step out and take the chance on doing it?
That's an interesting question.
Well, so I'll answer it this way, right? Because most people, so the idea around driving awareness, right? The nonprofit that we started was this idea, right? Because most people, when they talk about being aware of what's happening, it's usually what they're doing, right? Am I being aware of what I'm doing? And for the most part, people are aware of what they're doing, but there are sometimes we're not, right? And we've all had that experience where we're driving, we may be on the route that we've known for a long time, or we've done multiple times, and all of a sudden we get there and we're like, oh my gosh, how did I get here, right? So for the most part, we know what we're doing. And now it's becoming more normalized on the why we're doing it. Meaning, well, why are you driving your car? Well, I need to get home, I need to get groceries, whatever it is, right? But the most important piece, and this is what I relate to this conscious and subconscious, right? Because neuroscience shows us about 95% of our activity happens below our awareness, right? Our conscious awareness. So you go, wow, that seems like a lot. Well, think about what our body does without us having to input it in, right? It regulates our blood, it controls our temperature, it does all these things that we don't have to really think about in the background, right? So the most important piece that most people don't think about is the how, meaning how are they showing up, or better way to put it is how are they being for the what and the why that they're doing it. So to your point, Winston, it's like if I'm showing up as an entrepreneur and I've got these tasks, and like James said, it's like trying to boil the ocean, right? So we're like, oh my gosh, where do I even start? So we come to the table, and whatever task that we're trying to come to, and whether, and to answer your question, right, I don't know what the answer is, but most of us have been conditioned through kind of fear, scarcity, lack, and then the guardrails are usually guilt and shame, right? If you do something wrong, that means that was a bad thing, but then the shame says you are a bad person because you did this, right? So now imagine you've been in like, for me, I was in the same company for 22 years, a bunch of different roles. So now I leave that role to whatever I've been conditioned to, whatever I've been coming to the table with, without really a lot of intention behind it, right? And then now I go out and start this business, and whatever task I'm faced with, it could be something small, it's just kind of getting my checklist done for the day, or trying to secure a new client. And what I'm doing, I'm pretty cognizant of what I'm doing. I may be even pretty aware and pretty in tune with why I'm doing it. But if I'm showing up from this conditioned state of fear, guilt, and shame, and I'm trying to do this business, whatever it is I'm trying to do, the impact I'm going to have is going to be very, very different if I can be intentional. And when I say intention, I mean I'm going to set how I'm going to show up for this thing. I'm going to show up from a place of curiosity, a place from acceptance, from a place of joy, let's say, right? And then now imagine the impact that has in whatever it is that you're doing or why you're doing it, right? So it doesn't, to me, it's not that I don't care about the what or the why. I don't worry about the what or the why. I care about the how. And that's what the work that we do is getting to that foundational level of how you show up for anything. Because I can show you all the tricks and trade on how to get clients and how to network. But if you keep showing up from this place of scarcity and fear and lack, it doesn't really matter, right? And so that's what we're trying to do, is get to the root cause of these things. So hopefully I answered your question kind of a roundabout way.
And I'll piggyback off that as well, actually.
Yeah.
Because I see it very much as a shift in perspective as well in how you show up. Because Winston, you mentioned like from sales standpoint, if I go into a sale feeling like I am trying to persuade, or I'm trying to, really push my product on somebody, then that's a very different way of showing up and how I'm being in that moment, rather than if I'm showing up from a place of servitude and, hey, I'm coming to this person trying to understand their problems, trying to understand their kind of pain points and create a solution for them, and really come from a place of servitude. And that perspective change also, at least for me, allows me to show up in a very different way, rather than this, okay, if I go in thinking I'm trying to take rather than give, there's almost this fear. There's this and some of the guilt of, okay, I'm just really pushing my agenda on someone else that may or may not want it. And in reality, it also shifts how things show up and how you look at it as well. Because a lot of folks are very afraid of rejection, especially when it comes to sales, and in business, that's everything. Everything is a sale, everything's a conversation, everything's a negotiation, from the Chris Voss standpoint. But having that perspective shift allows you to show up from a lot better of a place. And it then becomes you and your client or customer or whoever, instead of in an adversarial way, coming together to face a problem together.
No, that's so good. Because I feel like so much of what's out there is geared towards the tactics. Like David mentioned briefly, and even what you touched on a little bit, James, it feels like it's more, you don't have the skills, right? And if you learn these skills or these you show a person something 7 times, like the sale will happen. And I would love to know more about, if you guys could share some of the maybe ideologies that you guys have at your company that really speak to people's, I don't want to call it their real, not problem, but the challenge areas that they're really having. So it's not so much you don't know the techniques, but to your point, James, you're just not seeing it correctly, or you're not approaching it in the best way.
Yeah, I think it's almost based in this exact question, where people know, but how they show up to any engagement or the tools that they're using, it's very stunted if they don't allow themselves to come from a very true, authentic place. Because I think probably all of us in some capacity have been in a meeting somewhere or in some sort of engagement, and we're not being true to ourselves. So then it feels a little canned. It feels a little off, and then the other person can feel that energy of something's off. It's not authentic. It's there's something you're pushing here, and when in reality, if you just showed up as yourself, you would do far better, and not to mention, you just would connect with the people that you're meant to connect with.
Yeah.
Well, and on that note, right? So when we talk about showing up authentically, right, this is a topic that we dive into deeply around not only the driving awareness, but my coaching is the self-suppression, right? And when I say self-suppression, I mean from a fundamental level, right? Because there's this innate desire that we want to fit in this part of the tribe, right? Because if we are ostracized from the tribe, that means we are going to die, right? So our minds go busy into, I have to fit in. But here's the situation though. Our minds can't discern if we're trying to fit into a situation that's toxic or a situation that's empowering, right? It doesn't matter, because all it wants to do is fit in. It doesn't discern, is this toxic? Is this empowering? Is this not? So when we when, to your point right now, we have all this knowledge, but we've been conditioned to suppress ourselves in order to fit in. So what we're saying in that moment is, don't be authentic right now, because it may mean that you get ostracized and you die, right? So now here you are as an entrepreneur, a solopreneur especially, right? You're out in the world, you're trying to convey your ideas, your message, whatever it is, but you still have been in that conditioned state of suppression. How in the world do you show up authentically in that moment? You don't automatically just switch, right? Because what like James Clear says in Atomic Habits, you don't rise to your highest goals, you fall to your lowest systems, right? So how many of us have been intentional about building a system of authenticity that's truly from a place of authenticity, and not from a place of, I have to fit in, I have to look a certain way, I have to be a certain way in order to survive, right? So then when we show up and it's like, oh my gosh, it's hard for me to express really what it is that I want to go on. I know all this stuff, but I just can't get it out. Well, yeah, because you're combating literally decades of conditioning that said, keep that stuff in there.
Well, okay, so I'm really curious about how you guys help people then embody their authenticity. How do you help them be? I know you mentioned something about breathing. So what are some of the methods that you guys use in driving awareness to help?
Yeah. So one of the fundamental systems that we use is Dr. Sue Morter's energy codes. And she wrote this book, I think right before the pandemic. And so when I found her work, the foundations in which she was speaking about, it was all these things that I was coalescing myself kind of on my own and putting together, and also in this book. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's expressing all these things that I've been wanting to express. I'm like, this is amazing. And so the fundamental thing she talks about is that everything is energy. What I mean by that, and I don't mean the woo-woo energy, there's some of that for sure, but what I mean is literally from a physics standpoint, if you break everything down at an atomic level, it's energy, right? But here's the thing, like energy is the atoms are 99.999999 energy and 0.0000001% mass. But what do? We go around focusing on the physical part of it, trying to change the physical part, the mass part of it. So we exert all this energy, all this effort, and we make little changes, right? We make these little incremental changes over our lifetime. And if you say persistent, you'll get it done. And if you're like, they say like, look, if you just keep doing 1% a day, you'll get there. That's all fine. But that's working at the Newtonian model of like, things are linear, things have to happen, things have to progress at a quantum level. We are shown that things
Instantly.
don't need. There's no There's no momentum needed. There's no time needed. Things happen like that. And so what she talks about is the breath is our way to connect back to our energetic systems, because what she talks about is that the authentic self, right? Or she calls it the soulful self, is that when we are constantly disembodied, constantly identified as the mind, constantly seeking validation externally, then when we try to go internally, when we're out there on our own trying to build a business and we have to seek internally, we've lost that skill because we've been so conditioned to focus everything externally, right? Because how many times have you been told, or how many times have you been led to believe that when you have the perfect partner, when you have the perfect house, when you have the perfect career, then you could be fulfilled, then you could be joyful, then you could be at peace? No, what quantum science shows us, that when you are generating or you're being in a state of peace, a state of fulfillment, guess what happens around you, right? And that's just energetics, right? That's just physics. If you vibrate at a certain frequency, guess what has to resonate back, right? It's like two guitars that are sitting on the opposite sides of the room. If they're both in tune with each other, if you pluck that G string of the one guitar, that other guitar G string vibrates automatically. It has no choice. Right? So if we're showing up in the world from a place of scarcity, fear, doubt, insecurity, shame, guess what gets vibrated back? But if we start showing up from a place of, I don't know, openness, curiosity, authenticity, guess what starts getting reflected back? And the way that we do that is through breath work, right? And so one of the fundamental things that she talks about in the breath work is most people, when they breathe and they stop right about here. Right, our diaphragm is right where your ribs splay open. Right there is your diaphragm. If you watch young kids, especially toddlers, when they breathe, what happens first is their stomach expands and then their chest expands. Most adults, their chest expands and their stomach never expands. Now, why that's so key is because right at the bottom lobes of your lungs, when you activate that part of your lungs, you automatically activate your parasympathetic nervous system, that the rest and restoration part of our nervous system. Because what neuroscience shows us about most adults are in that fight or flight response 70 to 80% of the day. Wow. So while you're like, okay, well, is that good? Is that bad? We naturally have that state for a reason. Absolutely we do, right? But it's meant to be in short bursts. So that way, when we come across something, we get flooded with all these things for us to get ready to do something. Now, if we're doing that 70 to 80% of our day and we're not dissipating any of that energy, we're just getting ramped up, and then nothing ever happens, well, what happens to that energy, right? That's damaging our system, because our system isn't meant, it's like taking a race car or a Ferrari or a Porsche or something and driving it in the red all the time. It's meant to go fast, it's meant to be quick, but it's not designed to be driven in the red 80% of the time, right? When you need it to go, great, it's there, but then you throttle back down and you cruise along and do whatever you need to do. But most of us, when we're caught in that conditioned response, we never get out of that fight or flight. So the quickest way to do that is when you take that breath, expand that bottom part of the lungs. If you do it right now, you'll just naturally start to feel your body's rhythm start to slow down, because what happens is your mind follows your body, and our bodies naturally resonate at this alpha signal, right? It's kind of that calming signal. Most of our brains and our thoughts are in that beta signal. So we're like this. And so when we try to calm down and we try to get in touch and try to like assimilate things, it's really difficult. So when we take that deep breath, our minds automatically start to go into that alpha wave and we start to become synchronized back to mind body. And it's quick, and it happens literally in a breath or two.
Wow.
This is so timely. I don't know if it was last week, but I heard somebody made this statement. The first thing we do when we get here is take a breath, and then the last thing we do is let one out. And I was like, bars. Like, I was like, how crazy is that? So to hear you talking about this is, man.
Wow. Okay, so I'm also curious then, how have you guys used this in like your personal lives? I'd love to hear how it's helped you personally.
Yeah,
I have something else to follow that up afterwards.
It ripples into every aspect of life, I would say, because especially me growing up, didn't have much, single mom or 3 boys, and just trying to make ends meet. And I learned everything from her, and she was always in that red line state, just white knuckling life and stressed and in that fight or flight state all the time. And then when you naturally inherit that. And in my early 20s, I started to notice, like, man, I'm just struggling here. And
Well, you probably inherited that in the womb, by the way.
I was just going to mention that. Yeah.
Yeah, like all the cortisol that's released, and
Yeah.
and it's incredible how quickly it's passed down.
Mm.
But then when you start to do this work, where if you're not in fight or flight 70-80% of the time, it opens up the aperture of life. Because we were talking about this recently, where you get so tunnel visioned when you're in that fight or flight of, I just need resources, I need to make ends meet, I need to figure out the next thing. But it's so tunnel vision that you miss the broader aspects of life. And then you get to take things in where creativity, ideation, all these things come to you that much easier when you're not redlining, kind of sitting at the base of Maslow's hierarchy of resources and finding community and all these elements. And then that translates into a better home life as well. When I come home from work, previously I'd be like, I need a 30-minute ramp down time because I'm in this state. Mm-hmm. And because I'm still, just wired from the day. Mm-hmm. And it's really tough to go and transition into somewhere else until you're able to at least identify and communicate that, let alone when you have more ability to come down or come out of that state faster just through simple breath work. I know when I walk right before I'm in the door, I do a couple of breath work exercises. We call it the channel breath. And it immediately brings me into a lower, calmer state that when I walk in and I see my 8-month-old daughter, I'm just so full of joy, and I get to truly experience that rather than I'm walking in, I'm distracted from the day, I'm not present, I'm elsewhere, and I just get to truly be there in the moment and not just stuck in that fight or flight.
I love that.
Yeah, so for me, I can't understate the impact that it's had in my life, honestly, because when I think about it, like, I'm coming from the corporate world. And so, but prior to that, my brother and I both were adopted from Korea. And so he's 6 years older than me. So we were in the orphanage from when I was about 2 and he was about 8. But prior to that, we had experienced a lot of heavy trauma from our birth father, right? And so I knew about this. And I thought that was kind of processing and dealing with it, right? And so my whole life, I've kind of known that was in the background. And it wasn't really until I started down this path, got out of corporate, started coaching, and I was like, wow, there's a lot of stuff that's coming up for me. And so when I first left corporate and went into the coaching world, I went into executive coaching because I was like, I'm an executive. I gravitate towards coaching. This makes sense. But with about a year, I was tense, I was stressed out, and I was not fulfilled. And I was like, what is happening here? And so when I went down the road of healing, I was like,
that's the timer. Oh, that was so fast. All right, guys, if you want to hear the rest of what David is about to say, make sure you join us in Overtime. The link for Overtime is down below in the description. We're going to get into some good stuff. So make sure you check it out.
I definitely have a lot of questions.
All right. So look, if you want to get in touch with David and James as a part of their organization with Driving Awareness, you can find them on Instagram. I'm sure. Nope. Oh, okay, there it is. There's the Instagram. And there's the website where you can find them to get involved. They're real people. If you reach out, they will respond. So please go ahead and do that. But I'm really excited to get into Overtime.
Absolutely. And for everybody else, we'll see you guys next time. But until, as always, remember, you deserve the good life.
Say that.
We'll see you guys in a little.
Thank you.